Tonight, we drift into the smoky halls of the Norse and the creaking chambers of medieval castles, where bedtime was anything but ordinary. You open your eyes to the flicker of firelight, and already you probably won't make it through this day. The hall smells of smoked fish, damp wood, and a hint of sweat that clings to every fur blanket. This is no cozy Airbnb cabin. It's a Viking longhouse, the kind that looks majestic from the outside and then reveals itself to be one big communal sleepover inside. You lie on a rough bed of straw layered with animal skins. Some of the skins are stiff, some soft, and some, let's be honest, smell like they've been through a particularly muddy winter. Around you, families huddle close, not for affection, but because warmth is survival. The fire in the central hearth throws out more smoke than heat, and that smoke has to escape through a hole in the roof. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Tonight, it doesn't. Children cough gently in their sleep. Someone's grandmother snores with the force of an ox cart rolling downhill. A dog paws at your blanket as if to remind you that, yes, he gets half of it. And you wonder, is this really how Vikings slept? Actually, yes. Archaeological digs in Scandinavia show that Viking longhouses had central hearths, long benches, and raised wooden platforms where people slept side by side. The idea of a private bedroom? That's centuries away. Privacy here is as rare as silence. A curious little tidbit. Sometimes chickens wandered through the longhouse at night. Not as pets, but as part of daily life. Imagine drifting into sleep only to be startled by a hen pecking at your straw mattress. If you think your noisy neighbor is bad, try falling asleep next to a rooster with no respect for sunrise. Of course, historians still debate whether Vikings preferred to keep their animals inside all winter, or only during the coldest months. Either way, the smell left its mark. And yet, despite the chaos, you feel a rhythm in the room. Breathing patterns merge. The fire crackles in soft intervals. Somewhere in the distance, a bard's voice lingers, echoing a half-finished saga. The longhouse is alive, but it is also strangely soothing, like falling asleep in the middle of a very large, very unshowered family. Before you drift, let me whisper something modern into this ancient air. If you're still awake, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more sleepy history tales, and, just for fun, comment below with your location and the local time right now. I'll be quietly amazed if you made it this far without yawning. Now let's ease into tonight's journey, deeper into the world of Viking sleep. You wake again, or maybe you never really fell asleep. The smoke is heavier now, and your throat is dry. You sit up, brush straw from your tunic, and watch the room. The family to your left stirs, shifting like restless birds. Someone pulls a blanket tighter. Another stretches, cracking their neck, then immediately tries to curl back into the warmth. Sleep in the Viking world isn't one long stretch of unconscious bliss. It's broken into fragments. 2 sleeps, some historians say, divided by a period of wakefulness in the middle of the night. And what do people do during that midnight intermission? Some pray, some talk, some check on the animals. Others tell stories. Imagine being woken by your neighbor at 2 in the morning, not for noise complaints, but to share the next chapter of a saga. You might groan, but secretly you'd probably listen. After all, Netflix doesn't exist yet. There's a quiet humor in it. Half the room awake, half still snoring, while conversations drift like smoke over the embers. Someone mutters about dreams. Another swears they saw an omen in the firelight. Children stir. A baby cries, then quiets again. The major fact here, segmented sleep, the idea of first sleep and second sleep, was common in many pre-modern societies, not just in Viking culture. It's only with industrialization and artificial lighting that we began expecting one long, unbroken night. And here's a curious tidbit. In some Norse households, beds were built into the walls like little wooden boxes, with curtains to pull across. Cozy, yes. Private, sort of. Airflow? Questionable. But the sense of retreat must have been comforting. Yet historians still debate whether every Viking followed this segmented rhythm, or if it varied by region and season. The midnight break might have been more common in the long Scandinavian winters than in summer, when the sun barely dipped below the horizon. You lean back again, listening to the fire pop. Remember the dog who stole half your blanket earlier? He's now curled in a perfect circle, radiating smug warmth. You almost envy him. In this hush, you feel history less like a lecture and more like a lullaby, messy, smoky, and oddly human. You close your eyes. The longhouse sighs with you. Sleep comes in pieces, but it comes nonetheless. You drift into that hazy state where you're not sure if you're dreaming or simply listening. The hearth is little more than a glow now, faint orange tucked into ash. The room is quieter than before, though not silent. Someone is whispering, someone else is moving a pot, and, because fate has a sense of humor, the rooster decides it is morning despite the black sky outside. You roll over and realize your shoulder is pressed against a wooden beam. Beds in Viking houses are not what you'd call ergonomic. Wooden frames, straw stuffing, animal hides. Functional, yes. Memory foam, not so much. You stretch your arm and it crunches through the straw with a sound almost like autumn leaves. Here's the truth. Sleep was survival. In a cold northern climate, the body needed rest, but the night was never entirely safe. You could be woken by weather, by livestock, or by the neighbor's child kicking you in the ribs. Not exactly the luxury of 8 hours, undisturbed. One important fact: archaeologists have found evidence of shared bed platforms in Viking homes. Long wooden benches where entire families slept side by side. Imagine your whole family, plus a couple of farmhands, lined up shoulder to shoulder, each person negotiating their square foot of comfort. Snoring would not just be an annoyance, it would be a structural part of life. Now, for a strange tidbit. Sometimes Vikings slept with their weapons close at hand, not just for defense, but also because iron and steel were believed to have protective powers. You might feel a little safer curling around your sword, though to modern ears it sounds like the worst bedtime teddy bear imaginable. Of course, historians still debate whether this was common or more of a poetic exaggeration in the sagas. After all, it's hard to say if warriors truly hugged their axes in bed, or if storytellers simply liked the image. You shuffle under your blanket, feeling the warmth of the fire ebb away. Your eyes wander up toward the rafters, where smoke curls and hangs like heavy clouds. You think about spiders nesting up there. You try not to think too hard about it. And in this moment, half awake, half dreaming, you realize Viking sleep wasn't about silence or comfort. It was about endurance, about the shared rhythm of survival. You let out a small sigh, and the room seems to sigh with you. You open your eyes again. Time has passed, though it's impossible to know how much. Outside, faint light peeks through the cracks in the wooden walls. Morning is approaching, though the house itself clings to darkness. Around you, people begin to stir. Someone yawns with the weight of centuries. A child sits up, hair wild, rubbing their eyes. The grandmother who snored all night now mumbles a morning prayer. Sleep is not over, but it is unraveling. Here is something to know. In medieval Europe, centuries after the Vikings, sleep began to look a little different. Nobles developed private chambers, separate beds, sometimes even feather mattresses. Yet most common folk still shared spaces, sleeping side by side on straw-stuffed sacks. Comfort grew only slightly, while noise remained eternal. A curious detail from the Middle Ages. Bed sharing wasn't just for family. Travelers, servants, and strangers often shared a mattress at inns. Imagine checking into a roadside tavern and being told, "Yes, you'll be sleeping with 2 farmers and a wandering minstrel tonight." Privacy was a luxury, not a right. Historians still debate whether this constant closeness fostered intimacy or irritation. Probably both. If you've ever argued over blanket space with one person, imagine doing it with 6. Back in the longhouse, the fire finally collapses into ash. The rooster crows again, this time in a way that cannot be ignored. The dog stretches, shakes out his fur, and demands breakfast. You smile faintly, thinking how some things never change. The humor of it lingers. Humans may have been warriors, traders, or kings, but in the end, they were all people trying to get a good night's sleep in less than ideal conditions. You glance at your straw mattress, sigh, and admit, sleep here is more of an art than a science. And with that, you rise slowly with the others, carrying the weight of another restless but strangely comforting night. The house exhales as its doors creak open, letting in the pale light of a northern morning. You step outside, rubbing your eyes, the cold air instantly waking you more than any rooster ever could. Frost clings to the wooden beams, and the grass crunches under your bare feet. You can almost taste the sharpness of the dawn. You think back to the night, how restless it was, how every cough, shuffle, and straw crackle stitched itself into the fabric of your half-dreams. It strikes you, maybe sleep wasn't meant to be perfect. Maybe it was meant to be negotiable. Here's a fact. Medieval and Viking Age people often slept in 2 distinct phases. Historians call it first sleep and second sleep. You'd sleep for a few hours, wake in the middle of the night, sit by the fire, pray, talk, maybe even do chores, then return for second sleep until dawn. So if you wake up at 3 a.m. today, congratulations, you're not broken, you're historically accurate. A quirky tidbit floats in. Some accounts suggest people used the waking hours between first and second sleep for intimacy, or even to visit neighbors. Imagine knocking on your friend's door at midnight, saying, "Hey, just thought I'd stop by, since we're all awake anyway." Cozy for some nightmare fuel for introverts. Of course, historians still debate how universal this 2-sleep system really was. Some think it was widespread across Europe. Others think it may have been more localized. The evidence, like sleep itself, drifts in and out of clarity. You shuffle back inside, brushing frost from your arms, and the warmth of the hearth already draws you in like a moth to flame. The longhouse smells of smoke and porridge. Someone hums, someone coughs, and you think, perhaps waking and sleeping were less opposites, and more like waves, rolling in, rolling out. You sit down, feeling straw still clinging to your hair, and laugh quietly at yourself. History may be heavy, but sleep history? It's as human as bedhead. Later, as the day stretches on, you find yourself wandering through a small medieval village, far from the Viking coast. The streets are narrow, uneven, with puddles reflecting the gray sky. People bustle around, carrying baskets, calling out, feeding animals. But your eyes keep drifting to the beds you glimpse through open doors. Simple, lumpy, but undeniably present. Sleep here is a public matter, not hidden away. Curtains are rare luxuries. Privacy is more rumor than reality. The walls are thin, and the snores of one household might drift comfortably into the ears of another. One important fact: in medieval towns, Many poorer families slept in communal lofts above the animals. The body heat from cows, pigs, and chickens helped warm the house. Yes, medieval sleep was literally powered by cow breath. A delightful oddity. Some people believed placing a knife under your pillow kept away nightmares. You try to imagine drifting off peacefully while a blade rests inches from your ear. Comforting? Maybe. Safe? Absolutely not. Still, historians admit uncertainty here. Did most people truly practice this? Or is it just one of those little notes that crept into folklore? Scholars shrug, much as you would shrug when told to share a bed with a stranger and a squealing pig. The village hums as you walk on, but you notice, even in daylight, people seem tired. Bags under their eyes, slow movements, a sense of carrying sleep debt centuries before coffee shops appeared. A farmer yawns so wide it seems to swallow the morning mist. A woman smacks her husband's arm as he nods off mid-conversation. And you think to yourself, history wasn't built by the wide-awake. It was built by the half-asleep, trudging through life, yawning into the centuries. You lean against a wooden post, listening to the clatter of hooves and the cry of children, and you wonder if maybe the most human thing of all is not conquering kingdoms, but simply falling asleep anywhere you can. The day presses on, but your mind drifts back to the night. You imagine the feel of straw under your cheek, the uneven rhythm of snores surrounding you, and you realize something strange. Sleep then wasn't a solitary escape, but a collective performance. Everyone contributed their sounds, their shifts, their murmurs. A nightly symphony of human survival, performed with zero rehearsal and no applause. Here's a fact. Medieval beds were often much shorter than modern ones. Not because people were dramatically smaller, but because sleeping upright was considered healthier. Lying flat was thought to encourage illness or even death. So many folks slept propped up on pillows, like an endless game of sit-sleep. Imagine falling asleep on your couch with the TV still on. That was basically standard practice. And for a little oddity, some households placed sprigs of herbs like lavender, rosemary, or even wormwood in the bed to ward off pests or bad dreams. A kind of medieval aromatherapy, except wormwood smells more like medicine than relaxation candles. Historians still debate whether upright sleeping was universally practiced, or if it was just trendy among elites who had the furniture to attempt it. Either way, it explains why old portraits sometimes show people reclining like they're perpetually mid-nap. You picture yourself sitting up in a too-short bed, knees bent, staring into the shadows. Your feet stick out, your back aches, and you wonder if this is what restorative sleep was supposed to feel like. Then again, if everyone else was equally uncomfortable, maybe nobody noticed. As you pass a carpenter's workshop in the village, you notice a half-finished bed frame, rough but sturdy. He sands the wood slowly, almost rhythmically, as though sleep itself will depend on his precision. And in a way, it will. You walk on, thinking about all the things people believed about sleep, that it could heal, that it could harm, that it was mysterious. The truth is, even with all our science, it still is. Evening creeps back, as it always does, with a quiet persistence. The air cools, the village noises fade, and once again people prepare for night. You follow, drawn back indoors, curious to see how another community readies itself for rest. This time, the house you step into is wealthier. The wooden beams are carved, the hearth larger, the bedding softer. A feather mattress rests on a raised frame, covered with linen sheets. Compared to the straw piles of the longhouse, this feels like luxury. You run your hand across the fabric and marvel. It's smooth, clean, almost indulgent. Here's an important fact. Linen was prized for bedding in medieval Europe, not just for comfort but because it could be washed more easily than wool. Of course, easily is relative. You still had to haul water, scrub, rinse, and dry. But for those who could afford it, linen sheets were a mark of refinement. Now, for a peculiar tidbit. In some households, people believed that tucking children in too tightly might prevent them from growing properly. So while swaddling infants was common, older children were sometimes left with more freedom, their little feet sticking out, their blankets twisted. You glance at a child's bed here, and sure enough, the blanket looks like it's lost a wrestling match. Naturally, historians still argue about how widespread these bedding customs really were. Written records come mostly from wealthier households, leaving us to guess how ordinary families adapted. Sleep history, like dreams, is blurry at the edges. The wealthy family settles in. Candles are snuffed, prayers whispered, shoes stacked by the wall. A dog curls at the foot of the bed, tail twitching in dreamland. The fire pops, and you feel yourself drawn once again into the rhythm of their night. As your eyelids sink, you think, whether straw or feather, short bed or long bench, one truth has always lingered. Humans, no matter their wealth, are all vulnerable when they close their eyes. And maybe that shared vulnerability is the most uniting thing of all. Night deepens again, and you find yourself wandering outside. The village is hushed, its sounds dampened by the thick embrace of darkness. Only a few thin lines of smoke rise from chimneys, curling lazily into the sky. The moon is pale, steady, indifferent. You walk past a row of cottages, peering into small, open windows. Inside, people sleep in bundles. Parents with children, grandparents with grandchildren, bodies lined like logs in a pile. The intimacy of it is overwhelming. You can almost hear the shared breathing, one person's inhale becoming another's exhale, like the world itself is rocking them all together. Fact: medieval Europe had a custom called the bedstaff, a long wooden pole used to tuck in the heavy bedclothes. Mattresses were often stuffed with straw, feathers, or wool, and topped with thick blankets. The bedstaff helped wedge all of it into place, like stuffing a sandwich into a too small wrapper. Practical but also comedic if you imagine someone losing their grip and launching bedding across the room. Odd tidbit: some people believed it was bad luck to sleep with your head pointing north. The reasoning varied. Some said it drew illness, others whispered it was a direction for the dead. You wonder how many restless nights were spent fretting about pillow alignment. Historians still debate how much ordinary people cared about these superstitions versus just collapsing wherever exhaustion hit. After all, if you've been working in the fields since dawn, you're probably not worried about your compass orientation. You pause outside one home and hear a lullaby drifting through the cracks. The melody is simple, almost haunting, sung by a tired voice. It carries the same message lullabies always have: sleep now, the world will wait. You smile at the thought, some traditions never age. And as you turn down the path, the darkness seems softer, like even the night is tucking itself in. By the time you return to the larger hall, the fire has been revived. Flames lick upward, shadows dance across the beams, and the warmth feels almost like a living presence. People shuffle back to their spots, preparing for what they consider second sleep. Here's a fact to anchor you: references to segmented sleep, the first and second slumber, show up in literature, diaries, and even legal documents from the late Middle Ages. People accepted it as natural, even expected. That midnight waking period was simply part of life. They prayed, tended fires, checked animals, whispered secrets. Imagine modern insomnia, but socially approved. For a curious tidbit, in some records, monks used that waking interval to recite prayers, while farmers used it to check on bread rising at the hearth. Imagine rolling out of bed at 1 a.m. to knead dough instead of scrolling your phone. Less blue light, more flour. And yes, historians still debate whether segmented sleep was universal or only common in certain climates or classes. Evidence suggests it faded as artificial lighting grew, allowing longer stretches of uninterrupted night. A reminder that technology changes even our dreams. You watch as the hall quiets again, each body finding its rhythm. The fire crackles softly, sparks drifting upward like tiny stars caught indoors. Someone sighs, someone coughs, and then silence rolls in, thick and comforting. You lie back, feeling the weight of history pressing as gently as a blanket. You think about how every culture has wrestled with the same nightly riddle. How do we rest in a world that refuses to pause? And slowly, as the fire hums, you begin to surrender to the answer humanity has always found. Imperfectly, together, in whatever space the night allows. The hall is hushed, but the silence is never absolute. You hear the distant creak of timber, the drip of water outside, the muffled rustle of someone shifting in their bedclothes. Sleep is not the end of sound. It is simply a new kind of orchestra, softer, stranger. As you lay there, you notice a curious detail. The fire has been carefully banked, buried under ash to keep it smoldering until morning. This was no accident. In societies without matches or lighters, fire was precious. To let it go out meant a cold, miserable dawn, or an awkward trip to a neighbor's hearth begging for a spark. Historical fact. Banking fires overnight was essential across medieval Europe. Ash insulated the embers, allowing them to be revived with a quick breath or a new log in the morning. Your modern equivalent might be setting an alarm, except instead of waking you up, it makes sure your soup and survival don't freeze. Odd tidbit. In some places, families would draw protective symbols in the ash around the fire before bed, believing it warded off evil spirits or bad luck. Imagine doodling little circles in your fireplace every night, not for fun, but for cosmic insurance. Historians still debate how widespread these rituals were. Were they genuine beliefs, or simply comforting habits, the medieval version of double-checking the lock? No one knows for sure, and perhaps that's the point. You shift your head, straw poking your cheek, and watch shadows dance across the rafters. The house feels alive, breathing with its sleepers, guarding its secrets. And you think, maybe rest is never just about the body, it's also about trusting the night itself. The thought soothes you, even as a rooster outside betrays the idea of silence once more. You smile, roll your eyes in the dark, and drift deeper. Dawn arrives reluctantly, bleeding through cracks in shutters and walls. You sit up, stiff but strangely satisfied. Around you, people begin their slow, groggy rituals. Rubbing eyes, stretching backs, reaching for shoes. A new day shaped by old sleep. You wander outside, where frost still lingers on rooftops. A woman shakes out bedding, releasing clouds of straw dust into the air. A man yawns so wide you fear he may swallow the morning. Children chase chickens with energy adults cannot fathom. Here's a fact to tuck away. Medieval bedding had to be beaten and aired regularly to drive out pests. Lice, fleas, and worse made their homes in straw mattresses. So families dragged bedding outside to sun it, beat it with sticks, and hope the little invaders would flee. Imagine your spring cleaning, but performed daily, and with more enthusiasm from the chickens than the humans. An odd tidbit from folklore. Some people believed that placing shoes upside down under the bed trapped nightmares. Others swore that sleeping with garlic or onions nearby could protect against evil. You wrinkle your nose at the thought. Peaceful dreams with a whiff of onion soup? Bold strategy. Of course, historians still debate how much of this was genuine belief versus playful superstition. Maybe it was half serious, like crossing fingers or knocking on wood, rituals that comfort without demanding proof. As you walk through the waking village, you see faces both weary and serene. Some slept deeply, some barely at all, yet all will trudge into the day. And you think, perhaps sleep was never about perfection, but about participation. Everyone adds their chapter to the nightly story, and together it becomes history. You pause by the well, watching your breath fog the air. Sleep clings to you like smoke, gentle, persistent. And for a fleeting moment, you wonder if maybe the dream never ends. It just changes costumes when the sun comes up. The day stretches onward, but you are never far from thoughts of the night. You walk the muddy lanes of another small settlement, noticing how even in daylight, hints of sleep remain everywhere. A blanket draped on a fence, straw mattresses propped against walls, children dozing on benches while their parents trade at the market. Fact for you, medieval households often repurposed their sleeping areas as daytime workspaces. Beds doubled as benches, storage, even places for weaving or mending clothes. Sleep didn't own its own room. It shared space with chores, meals, and conversations. Bedrooms, as we know them, are a suspiciously modern luxury. Strange tidbit. Some records suggest that cats were welcomed onto beds not for comfort, but as pest control allies. A purring feline at your feet was less about companionship and more about ensuring the straw mattress didn't wriggle with unwanted guests. Medieval multitasking at its finest. Still, historians debate whether every peasant could keep cats, or if that was more common in wealthier households. Either way, the idea of a furry exterminator doubling as a foot warmer seems timeless. You sit on a low wall, watching a group of women beat bedding with sticks. Dust and straw fly in the air, glittering in the weak sun. Children laugh and chase the motes as if they're magical. Sleep, you realize, was not only personal, it was public, stitched into community rhythms. Someone offers you a cup of ale. It's weak, more like liquid bread, meant to sustain rather than intoxicate. You sip, realizing this was another nighttime companion, strong enough to calm nerves, weak enough not to ruin the morning. And as you lean back, sipping slowly, you think, history is not just the story of battles and kings. It's the endless tale of people trying to find 5 extra minutes of rest in a noisy, inconvenient world. Evening again. The sun dips low, the village gathers close. Smoke curls from chimneys, dogs curl by doors, and children curl into laps. You follow the rhythm, stepping back into another household preparing for night. This time, the bed is raised high, almost chest level. The mattress is thick, the blankets layered. You climb onto it and realize it feels strangely like climbing onto a stage. Everyone watches you, amused. Beds this tall weren't for theatrics, though. They kept sleepers away from cold drafts and curious vermin at floor level. Historical fact. Wealthy medieval families often slept in great beds, towering wooden frames carved with ornate detail. Some were large enough to fit half a dozen people. They weren't just furniture. They were status symbols, heirlooms, declarations of comfort and wealth. Odd little tidbit. Some noble households kept bed warmers, metal pans filled with hot coals, slid under the sheets before sleep. Sounds cozy until you consider the fire hazard. Nothing says sweet dreams like the possibility of setting your bed ablaze. Naturally, historians still argue whether such practices were everyday routine or saved for the coldest nights. Surviving artifacts suggest both caution and extravagance. Perhaps that's the real answer. Humans have always gambled for comfort. The family here prays softly, then extinguishes candles. Shadows expand, wrapping the room in velvet. You lie back, half amused at the elevated bed, half soothed by its embrace. Outside, the wind rattles shutters. Inside, someone hums a tune too old to trace. And as you close your eyes, you feel history itself folding around you. Not in the grandeur of castles or battles, but in the soft rustle of blankets, the communal sigh of another night beginning. You wake in the middle of the night again, that peculiar gap between first sleep and second. The room is awash of shadows, dimly lit by the last stubborn embers in the hearth. Someone else is already awake, sitting by the fire, mending a torn sleeve by touch more than sight. Another murmurs a prayer. The world feels quiet but alive, as if night itself is a shared secret. Fact to tuck under your blanket. Many medieval people used this midnight interval to pray. Religious texts sometimes even gave specific prayers for the hours between sleeps. Night was not wasted, it was sanctified. Curious tidbit. Some households thought midnight was the best time for certain remedies. Herbal concoctions were brewed in the dark, under the belief that plants released stronger virtues at night. You imagine sipping a bitter, leaf-flavored sleep aid, while everyone else is nodding off. A medieval nightcap with more bark than bite. Historians still debate whether such midnight rituals were truly widespread or just described by the literate elite. After all, poor farmers may have preferred more sleep to midnight philosophy. But the written record whispers of a world where the boundary between dream and wake was thinner than we know. You sit by the fire, warming your hands, watching the sparks pop and scatter like stars. The air smells faintly of smoke and wool. Someone snores loudly behind you, the sound breaking the stillness but also grounding it. You smile faintly. Night, you think, is not for perfection, it's for persistence. And when your head finally grows heavy again, you stretch back across the straw-stuffed mattress, tuck your blanket, and slip gently into that elusive second sleep. Morning once more. Pale light leaks through the shutters, thin as parchment. You blink awake to the sight of bundled figures stirring around you. The rhythm of history is relentless. Sleep, wake, work, repeat. This day takes you into a monastery, its stone halls echoing with the soft shuffle of sandals. Here, sleep is measured, timed, almost rationed. Monks follow the rule, rising at set hours for prayers, even in the middle of the night. Imagine setting an alarm for 2 a.m., not to check your messages, but to chant psalms in cold stone chambers. Historical fact: monastic communities often practiced broken sleep, waking multiple times to pray. Sleep was not about rest alone. It was about discipline, sacrifice, devotion. To them, yawns were less weakness and more proof of faith. Obscure tidbit: some monasteries designed their dormitories with open sight lines so no monk could hide under blankets and doze through prayer bells. Eternal accountability: your snooze button was 50 brothers staring at you. Yet, historians still debate how rigidly such rules were enforced. In some abbeys, sleepy monks may have mumbled prayers half-conscious, swaying with drowsy devotion. Perhaps holiness looked a little like nodding off mid-hymn. You walk quietly through the dormitory. Rows of simple straw pallets line the stone walls, blankets folded neatly. No feather beds here, no roaring hearths. Just simplicity. A monk nods at you, serene despite the circles under his eyes. You sense a peace in him that comes not from comfort, but from surrender. And you wonder, maybe the secret to medieval sleep wasn't luxury or rituals, but acceptance. To lie down knowing it won't be perfect, and to rest anyway. You step away from the monastery, the echo of chants still lingering in your ears. The road bends, and suddenly you find yourself in a merchant's home, cozier than the monastic stone, but no palace either. The smell of spices hangs faintly in the air, clinging to the rafters like perfume. A sign of wealth, yes, but also of sleepless nights spent counting trade routes and cargo lists in your head. Historical fact: wealthier medieval households often had more comfortable bedding, wool-filled mattresses, feather bolsters, and even curtains around beds to keep warmth in. Curtains also kept nosy servants from noticing who slipped into whose bed, but we won't dwell on that. Curious tidbit: some merchants believed sleeping under certain colored fabrics influenced dreams. Blue for peace, red for strength, green for luck. It sounds almost like medieval mood lighting, except instead of a smart bulb, you just had a dyed blanket. Yet historians still debate whether this was superstition among a few or a widespread practice. Was it really about color magic, or just an excuse to flaunt your wealth in soft, expensive cloth? You lie down on the thick mattress, feeling your weight sink into the softness. Compared to the monastery, it's almost luxurious. Outside, faint street noises continue. Hooves clopping, a cart creaking, someone singing after one too many mugs of ale. But the curtains draw a cocoon around you, and the world outside grows muffled. Funny thing, even here in this relative luxury, sleep is still fragile. The merchant's wife stirs beside you, muttering about accounts. A servant tiptoes through the hall. Rest is not immune to worry, not even when your bed is stuffed with goose feathers. So you breathe, slowly, reminding yourself that comfort does not always guarantee peace. Another road, another night. This time you are invited into a castle, a place where sleep is both protected and vulnerable. Heavy walls keep danger out, but drafty towers let the cold seep in. You climb spiral stairs until your legs ache, and finally reach the chamber of a noble family. Historical fact: noble beds were sometimes so large that multiple people, family, attendants, even important guests, slept together. A symbol of intimacy and status, but also, let's be honest, the medieval equivalent of a crowded Airbnb. Obscure tidbit: in some courts, dogs slept at the foot of the bed not just for warmth, but as flea magnets. Better the dog gets bitten than the lord. You glance at the shaggy hound curled near the fire and can't help but think it looks a little too pleased with its job. Historians still debate how much privacy truly existed in these chambers. Some argue the great canopy beds, draped with velvet and lined with fur, were sanctuaries. Others suggest they were as public as a living room, bustling with servants at dawn. The truth is probably somewhere between comfort and commotion. You sink onto the velvet mattress, the canopy above you heavy with embroidery. The fabric smells faintly of smoke, fur, and candle wax. Beside you, the noble snores like thunder, shaking the very rafters. It's impressive, really. You roll onto your side, watching the flicker of the firelight, and think, so much wealth, so much display, and yet the basics of sleep remain the same. People still toss and turn, dream and wake, fight for warmth, long for quiet. And with that thought, you close your eyes, the soft crackle of the fire lulling you once again toward the deep river of rest. You wake, or maybe dream, inside a peasant's cottage again, though this one feels different. The roof is lower, the air denser with the smoke of peat and damp wood. Chickens shuffle outside. A baby whimpers, then falls silent with a rhythmic pat on the back. Historical fact: many peasants practiced segmented sleep. First sleep came shortly after sunset, followed by a waking period in the middle of the night, used for prayer, chores, or even quiet conversation, before drifting back into second sleep. So yes, waking up at 2 a.m. to overthink everything was historically normal. Obscure tidbit. During that midnight waking, people sometimes whispered dreams to each other, believing the dark hour was closest to the spirit world. Imagine the medieval version of late-night texting, except it was your spouse mumbling into the straw next to you. Historians still debate whether segmented sleep was truly universal or more common in rural households, where natural light patterns ruled. Some argue city folk with candles stretched their waking hours, blending the two sleeps into one. The fire dims, leaving only a faint orange glow. You lie on your side, listening to the soft breathing of family members huddled close. It's not exactly private, there's an elbow in your ribs and a snore in your ear, but there is safety in numbers. Safety and shared warmth. You let your eyelids droop. Somewhere, a rooster mistakes the moon for dawn. You sigh. Sleep will come again. It always does. This time you are carried to the north. A Viking hall, timber-framed and alive with flickering shadows. Long benches line the walls, cloaks and furs spread out as makeshift bedding. Warriors and farmers alike lie sprawled together, their snores weaving into a chorus that rattles the rafters. Historical fact. Vikings often slept communally in their longhouses. Privacy wasn't the point, warmth and shared space were. Families, servants, and even animals all found a spot under the same roof. Obscure tidbit. Sagas mention that warriors sometimes slept with their weapons close, even under their bedding, as if a sword could double as a security blanket. You look to your left. Yes, that man is definitely spooning an axe. Comforting? Questionable. Historians still debate whether Viking sleep was more rigid or flexible. Did families have assigned spaces, or did everyone simply sprawl where there was room? The sagas are quiet on this, as if snoring and bed-hogging weren't dramatic enough for legend. You tuck yourself under a rough wool cloak, the smell of smoke and sweat thick in the hall. A dog shifts near your feet. Somewhere down the row, a man lets out a sleep mumble in Old Norse. You don't understand the words, but the tone feels familiar. The nonsense of dreams. The fire crackles, sparks rising to the smoke hole above. You close your eyes, reminded that in every age, in every hall or hovel, the night belonged to the same search. A little warmth, a little peace, a little rest before the morning. You awaken in the gray pre-dawn light, the hall still humming with half-sleep. You feel the uneven timber beneath you, the furs tangling around your legs. Somewhere, a baby wails. Elsewhere, an adult coughs. Sleep isn't serene here. It's alive, a living, breathing organism shaped by bodies and breath and the occasional snort. Historical fact. Longhouse sleepers often shared a single fire pit. The embers provided warmth, but also light and smoke, which may have helped repel insects. Modern humans might scoff, but in an era without heaters or central heating, this was both practical and ingenious. Curious tidbit. Sagas suggest some Viking warriors kept dream talismans near their heads, small carved figures thought to protect sleep from ill omens. Imagine drifting off while a little wooden Thor glares at your ceiling. Peaceful? Perhaps, if you trust in tiny Norse figurines. Historians still debate how common these sleep charms truly were. Were they ritualistic, symbolic, or simply storytelling embellishments? The evidence, as always, whispers rather than shouts. You stretch, hearing the low murmur of the fire, smelling peat smoke and straw, and thinking, humans have always negotiated with the night. Even then, sleep was a bargain struck daily, fleeting and precious. Somewhere a rooster crows. You roll over, sighing, and remind yourself, first sleep is over, second sleep approaches. The night continues its subtle, unhurried rhythm, like a slow river carrying dreams along. By mid-morning, the hall feels almost luminous, though not quite bright. Faint sunlight filters through smoke-stained windows, hitting rough wooden floors and highlighting dust motes swirling lazily in the air. People stir, preparing for chores, meals, and the rituals of the waking world. Historical fact: in many Viking households, daybreak was marked by a routine called fire tending. The fire had to be carefully revived from embers banked overnight. Without it, breakfast, warmth, and even light would falter. The hearth was literally the heart of the household. Strange tidbit: some sagas mention that certain family members were considered sleep guardians, those who stayed awake a little longer to ensure the house remained safe during the night. Think of it as a medieval version of a baby monitor, minus the electronics and plus a sword. Historians still debate whether this was a formal role or simply a way to romanticize vigilance in the sagas. Regardless, it hints at the responsibility sleep carried in these societies. It wasn't passive. It required negotiation, compromise, and strategy. You wander toward the fire, toes curling in warmth. Outside, the wind rustles furs hung to dry. Children laugh, dogs bark, and someone hums a tune as they tend livestock. Sleep is behind you, or perhaps just beneath the surface, like a soft echo waiting for the next night. You sit quietly, feeling the residual pull of drowsiness. The rhythm of these days and nights, of fire and straw, of first sleep and second, begins to feel like a pulse you could follow anywhere, across centuries, across cultures. And somewhere deep inside, you realize, human rest has always been less about perfection and more about persistence, presence, and shared warmth. Night begins to descend again, pulling its soft shadow over the longhouse. You follow the villagers inside, the scent of smoke and peat thick in the air. People move slowly, their motions guided by habit and instinct rather than urgency. You notice the subtle creaks of floorboards and the soft rustle of straw, each sound magnified in the quiet. Historical fact: in medieval Europe, window glass was rare. Most homes had open slits or oiled cloth to let light through. At night, the absence of barriers made sleeping more communal, more vulnerable. You could hear your neighbors snore, cough, or whisper across streets and alleys. Privacy was optional, warmth was mandatory. Curious tidbit: some households used small clay dolls tucked into beds to watch over sleepers, warding off spirits or nightmares. You imagine lying down with a tiny guardian staring at your pillow, silently judging your sleep posture. It's oddly reassuring or creepy, depending on your tolerance for ceramic supervision. Historians still debate how widely such charms were used. Were they serious talismans, or quaint stories later scribbled in manuscripts to amuse readers centuries afterward? The truth flits like the shadows on the wall. You settle onto your straw bedding, feeling the familiar roughness. Around you, the village exhales as a single body, a collective lullaby of breaths and shifting limbs. You close your eyes and feel the night embracing you, a rhythm that has persisted long before your own restless tossing. Somewhere a cat stretches and mews. Someone coughs softly. A dog shifts its position. And you think, this is sleep in its purest form, imperfect, shared, and undeniably human. The fire crackles low, its warmth spilling across the wooden floor. You watch the shadows dance along beams, imagining them as silent storytellers of the night. Every flicker is a hint of the past, a whisper of how centuries of people have learned to surrender to darkness. Historical fact: in Viking longhouses, people often slept on raised platforms along the walls. These platforms were layered with furs and straw, keeping sleepers warmer and away from pests. It was practical architecture, blending comfort and survival in one design. Obscure tidbit. Some sagas describe warriors placing their shields beside their bedding, not just as defense but as symbolic protection against nightmares or evil spirits. You glance at the rough wooden shield leaning in the corner. It seems both heroic and ridiculously unnecessary in a room full of sleeping humans. Historians still debate the significance of these rituals. Were they deeply believed or simply dramatic storytelling devices? Regardless, they reflect the human desire to control the unknown, even in sleep. You lie down, letting the furs cradle your body. The warmth of the hearth, the rhythm of snoring companions, the quiet rustle of straw, all weave together into a tapestry that pulls you slowly toward rest. You think. Sleep has always been communal, rhythmic, and strangely comforting in its imperfection. As your eyes finally close, you sense the continuity of human nights. Viking, medieval, your own. All linked by a single, timeless search. For warmth, for safety, for that delicate surrender to darkness. The moon hangs low in the sky, silver and patient, as you find yourself back in a humble peasant cottage. The air is damp, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and the earthy aroma of straw. You sink into your bedding, listening to the soft chorus of nighttime life. A dog's sigh, the rustle of blankets, a distant owl calling. Historical fact. Medieval Europeans often slept with their heads elevated on small pillows stuffed with feathers or straw. This posture was thought to improve circulation, aid digestion, and prevent bad humors from settling in the body. You feel slightly superior imagining yourself an expert on humors and pillows, even as your back aches. Quirky tidbit. Some families hung small charms, coins, or pieces of string above beds to catch nightmares. You squint at the ceiling, imagining invisible dreams getting stuck on a dangling coin. It's a cozy, slightly ridiculous charm, but oddly comforting. Historians still debate how widely these practices were believed versus how much they were simply recorded by curious chroniclers. The truth, like a half-remembered dream, drifts in and out. You let yourself sink deeper into the straw mattress, feeling it give under your weight. Around you, the cottage seems to breathe, alive with warmth and half-waking motions. The night doesn't demand silence. It asks for patience. And as your eyelids droop, you think. Sleep is not perfect, not uniform, and rarely uninterrupted. But somehow, across centuries, it remains a faithful companion. Later, the wind whistles faintly against the longhouse walls. You're now inside a Viking hall again, furs and blankets spread across wooden benches. The communal bed space hums with quiet activity. Someone shifts, another coughs. The faint clink of a belt or sword echoes softly. Historical fact. Viking longhouses often had central hearths, providing warmth for everyone. The smoke helped repel insects and also served as light during the darkest months. It was a multi-purpose, essential feature of sleep and survival. Obscure tidbit. Sagas describe that some Viking families used herbs like juniper, thyme, or wormwood near their bedding to improve dreams, repel pests, or mask the smell of animals. You breathe in faintly, imagining the mix of smoke, herbs, and body heat as a primitive sleep cocktail. Historians still debate how rigorously these traditions were followed, whether they were everyday habits or idealized in stories. Like dreams themselves, the records are fragmentary, open to interpretation. You curl under the thick furs, the warmth seeping into your bones. The snore of a warrior nearby is oddly reassuring. Outside, the The wind continues its gentle rhythm, tapping against the walls. You think about the strange continuity of sleep. Humans sleeping upright or flat, in straw or fur, alone or together, across time and geography. Each night is a microcosm of life itself, imperfect, shared, and strangely sacred. The fire crackles, the shadows dance, and slowly, your mind drifts into the soft, unsteady river of dreams. You wake, or perhaps you never fully sleep, inside a modest medieval cottage. The morning is tentative, pale light slipping through cracks in the walls. You can smell damp straw and lingering smoke, feel the stiffness of your body from uneven bedding. Life outside has begun again, but inside, time seems suspended. Historical fact: in medieval households, the timing of sleep was often dictated by natural light. Candles and oil lamps were expensive, so most people rose and slept according to sunrise and sunset. Alarm clocks were not an option. Your body and the sun did all the reminding. Obscure tidbit: some households kept small pots of water near the bed, believing the sound of dripping could protect against evil spirits during sleep. You imagine a slow, rhythmic drip as a lullaby, less soothing than annoying but effective, apparently, in the minds of the superstitious. Historians still debate whether such practices were symbolic, ritualistic, or merely anecdotal. Perhaps they were all three, coexisting in layers like blankets over a straw mattress. You stretch, listening to the low murmur of your fellow sleepers. Somewhere a dog shifts a child's size. It's imperfect, chaotic, human, but it's also strangely comforting. And you think, sleep, no matter the century, is not about stillness. It's a shared ritual, a negotiation with the world, a pause that never truly stops. Night returns, and with it the familiar chorus of the longhouse. Furs are laid out, fires banked, and shadows stretch along the walls. The smell of peat smoke and animal fur fills the air. You feel the textures of history beneath your fingers, the roughness of straw, the softness of layered furs, the chill in the corners. Historical fact: in Viking and medieval Europe, communal sleep often involved multiple generations in one space. Elders, children, and even visitors would share platforms or bedding areas, balancing warmth and companionship. Solitude was a luxury few could afford. Curious tidbit: some sagas mention that Viking children were often allowed to sleep with small wooden toys or carved figures, perhaps the earliest documented comfort objects. You glance around, imagining a tiny wooden horse tucked under a blanket, guarding the dreams of its owner. Historians still debate how widespread these habits were, and whether sagas exaggerate for storytelling flair. But the essence remains. Sleep was as much social as it was private. You lie down, letting the blankets and furs cradle you. Around you, the longhouse exhales in unison. Soft groans, murmurs, shifting limbs. You realize that sleep is less about escaping the world and more about inhabiting it differently, in a rhythm older than any building or roof. The fire crackles one last time before settling, sparks fading into the smoke hole. You close your eyes, carried gently into the shared dream of centuries, where humans, no matter the era, chase warmth, safety, and rest beneath the same quiet sky. You awaken in the half-light of pre-dawn, the longhouse silent except for the occasional creak of timber settling. You feel the rough weave of straw beneath you and the softness of layered furs above, a small luxury in a world that never truly stops. Outside, the wind sighs through the trees, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and smoke. Historical fact: many medieval homes had no real separation between living and sleeping spaces. Cooking, eating, working, and sleeping all took place in the same room. You roll your eyes at the thought. Laundry, dinner, and sleep all in one spot? Modern minimalists might call it efficient. Others might call it chaotic. Obscure tidbit. Some families kept small clay whistles or bells near the bed, believed to ward off nightmares or evil spirits. You imagine the faint jingle as a medieval white noise machine, barely noticeable but perhaps effective in its superstition. Historians still debate whether these charms were widely used or mostly anecdotal stories preserved by chroniclers. The truth drifts in fragments, much like the drifting smoke from the night's embers. You sit up, stretching, and notice that even in this simple room, sleep leaves traces. Tousled furs, displaced straw, a stray slipper or belt. Imperfect, yes, but alive. And as you lie back, listening to the soft stirrings of the household, you realize that human rest has always been messy, communal, and deeply necessary. Night falls again and you return to the Viking hall. Shadows stretch long across the benches, blankets and furs forming an intricate patchwork. The fire crackles low in the center, sparks rising toward the smoke hole, carrying faint smells of peat and wood. The hall feels alive, breathing with the rhythms of those within. Historical fact. Vikings often practiced communal sleep on raised platforms along the walls, layered with furs and straw. These sleeping arrangements balanced warmth, comfort, and safety, keeping bodies off the cold floor and close to one another. Curious tidbit. Some sagas describe warriors keeping small tokens, carved figures, amulets, or even stones, near their pillows to influence dreams or ward off evil. Imagine drifting off while a tiny wooden Thor stares at your ceiling, judging your slouch. Historians still debate the extent of such rituals. Were they everyday habits, or literary embellishments meant to entertain and instruct? Either way, they reveal a human need to negotiate sleep, dreams, and safety. You settle beneath the furs, feeling the warmth seep into your limbs. The hall hums with soft snores, murmurs, and the occasional shift of a restless sleeper. Outside, wind dances against the timber walls, yet inside, all is protected, all is contained. You think about the unbroken thread connecting human nights across centuries. Each creaking floorboard, each whispered prayer, each shared blanket tells a story of persistence, presence, and the eternal quest for rest. And as the fire embers fade, you drift into the shared dream of history, carried gently by the rhythm of countless human nights before you. You awaken to the faint glow of dawn, stretching against the uneven straw beneath you. The longhouse is quiet now, but life stirs slowly. Somewhere a child coughs, a dog shifts in its fur nest, and the distant bleat of a goat reminds you that sleep is never truly complete. Historical fact. In medieval Europe, sleep schedules were dictated by natural light. Candles were expensive, so people often slept in two phases. First sleep after sunset, then a waking period, followed by second sleep until dawn. You groan softly, realizing humans have always been overachievers when it comes to managing sleep. Curious tidbit. Some households believed that talking softly during the middle of the night waking could influence dreams. Whispered conversations, lullabies, and gentle storytelling were thought to guide sleep toward pleasant visions. You imagine tiny bedtime conferences in the dark, with half-asleep participants nodding off mid-sentence. Historians still debate how widespread these practices were. Was segmented sleep common, or did chroniclers romanticize it for literary flair? The evidence remains murky, much like fog over a Viking fjord. You lie back, listening to the ambient rhythm of life around you. Sleep, it seems, is less about perfection and more about participation. A nightly negotiation with warmth, safety, and shared humanity. Night descends again, this time in a small medieval village on the outskirts of trade routes. Smoke curls from chimneys, dogs curl on doorsteps, and people begin laying down on straw mattresses, furs, and blankets. You follow the familiar ritual. Bank the fire, settle under layers, and listen to the world exhale. Historical fact: villagers often reused their bedding for multiple purposes. Straw-filled mattresses were beaten and aired regularly to repel pests. Blankets and furs served both as bedding and seating during the day. Efficiency was key. Comfort was relative. Obscure tidbit: some communities hung small bells or charms near beds to ward off nightmares or ill spirits. You imagine a gentle jingling as the villagers drift into segmented sleep, the charms jingling faintly with each restless shift. Historians still debate whether these charms were functional or largely symbolic. Perhaps they were a psychological comfort, a medieval version of a nightlight. You close your eyes beneath the furs, hearing the soft murmurs and shifting limbs of those around you. Outside, the wind whispers through thatched roofs and narrow lanes. Sleep, you realize, is never solitary. It's woven from shared warmth, rhythm, and the intimate imperfections of human life. And as the night deepens, you feel carried along by the quiet, communal pulse that has guided generations into dreams. You awaken in a humble peasant room, the faint light of pre-dawn spilling through cracks in the walls. Straw mattresses lie pressed against the floor, layered with rough blankets and furs. You stretch, feeling the unevenness beneath you, the slight chill of the morning creeping through your blankets. Historical fact: in many medieval villages, beds were multi-purpose. People sat, ate, worked, and slept on the same straw-filled platforms. Privacy was minimal, but warmth and practicality were paramount. You think wryly, modern minimalists might envy this all-in-one lifestyle, though your back might protest. Obscure tidbit: some households hung tiny herbal sachets above their sleeping areas, believed to ward off bad dreams or illness. The faint scent of lavender, rosemary, or thyme was thought to calm both body and spirit. You inhale, imagining a subtle herbal lullaby drifting through the room. Historians still debate how common this practice really was. Were sachets widespread or simply recorded in a few curious chronicles? Either way, the idea persists as a small comfort against the unpredictability of sleep. You lay back, listening to the faint creak of floorboards, the low murmur of companions, and the occasional distant crow. Sleep, it seems, is never isolated. It's threaded with the presence of others, with shared warmth, and with the tiny, tender rituals of centuries past. Night falls again, this time in a Viking longhouse. The fire burns low in the center, sparks drifting upward to the smoke hole. Furs and blankets line the raised platforms along the walls, the air thick with the scent of peat, animal hides, and the faint metallic tang of weapons stored nearby. Historical fact: Vikings often slept communally on platforms with furs, straw, and layered blankets. These arrangements provided warmth, safety, and companionship. Even in the harshest winters, bodies huddled together preserved life and comfort. Curious tidbit: some sagas mention placing a wooden figure, charm, or small amulet near the head of a sleeper to ward off nightmares or evil spirits. You imagine a miniature Thor glaring silently at your pillow, a weirdly reassuring nocturnal guardian. Historians still debate the prevalence of such charms. Were they deeply ingrained rituals, or merely narrative devices in the sagas? Either way, they reveal a constant human desire to negotiate with the unseen during sleep. You lie beneath the furs, the warmth soaking into your bones. Snoring, soft murmurs, and the occasional shift of a fellow sleeper create a gentle rhythm that lulls you toward dreams. Outside, wind scratches at the walls, but inside, all is sheltered, all is contained. You think about the continuity of human nights, Viking, medieval, your own, all bound by the same delicate pursuit, warmth, safety, and the elusive surrender to rest. You awaken in the faint glow of dawn, the longhouse stirring slowly around you. The smell of peat smoke mingles with straw and animal hides, filling the space with a familiar, grounding aroma. You stretch, feeling the uneven support beneath you, the rough textures of furs and blankets cradling your body. Historical fact: in medieval Europe, it was common for people to sleep in a series of short, segmented periods, often waking between first sleep and second sleep to pray, converse, or tend to tasks. Sleep wasn't a single block, it was a rhythm punctuated by activity and necessity. Obscure tidbit: some households hung small bells or charms above beds to ward off nightmares or evil spirits. You imagine the soft jingling as the faintest background sound, a medieval white noise machine that also served as reassurance. Historians still debate how widespread these practices were. Were segmented sleeps universal, or mostly confined to rural or religious communities? The records whisper hints but never provide certainty. You lie back for a moment, listening to the gentle murmur of your companions. Sleep, even when interrupted, carries its own quiet continuity, like a thread stitching generations together. Somewhere a child stirs, a dog shifts in its bedding, and you feel the comforting rhythm of a shared night. Night approaches again, this time in a modest village home along a trade route. Smoke curls from chimneys, dogs curl on doorsteps, and villagers begin to settle under their straw mattresses and layered blankets. The air smells faintly of cooked grains, herbs, and warm earth. Historical fact: in many medieval homes, beds were multifunctional spaces. People ate, worked, and socialized on their sleeping platforms, making the act of rest intertwined with daily life. Privacy was secondary to warmth and practicality. Curious tidbit: in some regions, families placed small clay or wooden figures near beds, believing these guardians would protect them from evil spirits and bad dreams. You imagine a tiny carved animal staring silently at your pillow, a whimsical sentinel of sleep. Historians still debate how widely these traditions were practiced. Were they practical superstition, storytelling embellishment, or somewhere in between? The answer is as elusive as the perfect night's rest. You settle under your furs, feeling warmth seep into your bones. The low hum of snoring, soft murmurs, and shifting bodies creates a gentle cadence that guides you toward dreams. Outside, the wind stirs against thatched roofs, but inside, you are protected, cocooned in centuries of human routine and shared rest. And as the night deepens, you are carried along by the same timeless pulse that has guided humans into sleep for generations. Warmth, companionship, and the quiet surrender to darkness. You awaken in the gray pre-dawn light, the longhouse quiet but alive with subtle movement. Someone shifts beneath a thick blanket, a dog stretches its limbs, and the distant crow of a rooster hints at the approaching day. You feel the uneven texture of straw beneath you, the softness of layered furs above. Historical fact: in Viking longhouses, communal sleeping was the norm, with raised platforms along the walls layered with straw and furs to provide warmth and comfort. Individual beds were rare. The focus was on shared warmth and protection. Obscure tidbit: Some sagas describe Viking families keeping small carved figures or amulets near beds, believed to protect the sleeper from nightmares or ill spirits. You glance at a carved wooden figure nearby, imagining it silently judging your sleep posture. Historians still debate whether these charms were genuinely used for protection or merely narrative embellishments in sagas. Regardless, they reveal a constant human desire to negotiate with the unknown during sleep. You lie back, listening to the quiet rhythm of the hall. Soft snores, gentle murmurs, the occasional creak of timber. Sleep, it seems, has always been communal, layered with care, superstition, and the practicalities of warmth. Night falls once again, this time in a small medieval village. Smoke rises from chimneys, the scent of cooked grains and herbs mingling in the cool air. Straw-filled mattresses and layered blankets await weary villagers, and the air grows hushed as families prepare for rest. Historical fact: medieval villagers often reused bedding materials and layered straw with furs to provide insulation from cold floors. Such arrangements were practical and essential for survival, particularly in winter months. Curious tidbit: some households hung herbs or small charms near beds to protect against nightmares or illness. Imagine drifting off to sleep beneath a faint aroma of rosemary or lavender, each tiny sachet offering comfort and ritual. Historians still debate how widespread these practices were. Were they common superstition or merely noted in select records? The truth, like sleep itself, is fleeting and fragmentary. You settle beneath your furs, listening to the gentle sounds around you. A dog's soft sigh, a child's murmured words, the low hum of neighbors. The fire crackles, shadows dancing across walls, and you feel the continuity of human nights. Shared warmth, vigilance, and the quiet pursuit of rest. And as your eyes grow heavy, you drift once more into the gentle river of dreams, carried by centuries of human rhythms and the comforting pulse of communal sleep. You awaken in the familiar half-light of dawn, the longhouse gently stirring around you. The scent of smoke, peat, and furs fills the air, grounding you in centuries of human routine. You stretch, feeling the uneven texture of straw beneath you, the soft comfort of layered blankets and furs above. Historical fact: across both Viking and medieval Europe, segmented sleep was common. First sleep, a brief waking period, and then second sleep allowed people to perform nightly chores, prayers, or quiet reflection. Sleep was never purely passive, it was woven into daily life. Obscure tidbit: some families hung small bells, charms, or tokens near beds, believing they could influence dreams or ward off evil spirits. You imagine a faint jingling as sleepers shift, an early form of white noise and security combined. Historians still debate whether such rituals were universal or anecdotal. The evidence is fragmentary, leaving room for speculation and wonder. You lie back, listening to the rhythmic sounds of the hall. A dog stretches, a child murmurs, fire crackles low. Sleep, even interrupted, threads together generations, a quiet continuity binding past and present. Night descends, wrapping the village and longhouse in its gentle shadow. Fires burn low, shadows stretch lazily across walls, and the smell of smoke, straw, and furs permeates the air. You settle beneath the layered blankets and furs, feeling warmth seep into your limbs. The hall hums softly with snores, murmurs, and the gentle stirrings of those around you. Historical fact: communal sleeping arrangements provided not only warmth but safety, ensuring that in every household, across every generation, people could rest together in rhythm with the natural cycles of day and night. Obscure tidbit: Viking and medieval sagas mention small wooden or clay figures tucked near beds to protect sleepers from nightmares. You imagine their silent, watchful presence, a comforting but slightly absurd ritual that persisted across centuries. Historians still debate the prevalence of such practices, whether they were functional, symbolic, or merely stories preserved for amusement. You close your eyes, letting the warmth and rhythm of the room carry you. Outside, wind brushes gently against timber walls, the distant rustle of leaves and faint animal calls creating a slow, natural cadence. Inside, the fire crackles softly, casting shadows that dance across walls, flickering over furs and blankets. You feel the continuity of human nights, shared warmth, communal vigilance, and the delicate pursuit of rest. Sleep is imperfect, layered, and fleeting, but it is also persistent, comforting, and deeply human. Now, let yourself drift completely, carried by the quiet pulse of centuries of shared nights. Each breath a gentle tide, each sound a soft lullaby. The smoke and shadows mingle into dreams as the longhouse exhales, the village hums, and the world, old as memory itself, settles into the same timeless rhythm. Rest at last is absolute, tender, and uninterrupted.